Good afternoon from Athens. Welcome to the ICOMIA World Marina Conference event Industry Reconnect. This event has been organized by ICOMIA after the cancellation, due to the pandemic of course, of the ICOMIA World Marina Conference in Dubai. We should say that the ICOMIA World Marina Conference in Dubai is rescheduled for October 2021. Today we have the second session of the Industry Reconnect webinar series. The title of the session is Boating and Tourism with COVID-19. What's next? I'm Stavros Katsikadis, the chair of the Greek Marine Association, and I will moderate the panel for the next 90 minutes. A panel consisting of experts in various tourism sectors, cruise tourism, yacht brokerage and chartering, European boating, but also other related industries such as aviation. Why aviation? But because it is an industry connected with tourism, widely suffering from the pandemic, and we are very interested in getting the insights from the experts for the forthcoming period and the next tourism season. So stay tuned, we will listen to our panelists for the next 1 hour, and then we will have our Q&A session. Please feel free to send any questions at any time. All questions will be visible, and please make clear who the question is aimed at. We will try to answer as many as we can. Your questions will help us in moderating the panel discussion. For your information, the whole session is being recorded and it will be available in the site of ICOMIA. We start now with our first presentation from Ms. Alessandra Priante. Unfortunately, Alessandra is not able to attend live today, so we have recorded her presentation. Alessandra is the Director of Europe at the World Tourism Organization. She has been a Chief of International Relations and Tourism Policy Issues for the Italian Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Forestry Policies. She has actively participated in the preparation of the National Strategic Plan for Tourism 2017 till 2022. Let's watch Alessandra's presentation.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you, ICOMIA, for having UNWTO as a speaker in your very important marine conference. My name is Alessandra Priante, and I'm the Director for Region Europe at UNWTO, the United Nations agency devoted to the promotion of sustainable, universally accessible, and inclusive tourism. Therefore, we are also known as the World Tourism Organization. Today is a very important day for us, and I really apologize for not having been able to connect virtually live in presence. We're in Brussels, where we're going for a very important meeting with all the high-level institutions, European Parliament, European Council, commissioners for transport, for tourism, and the Vice President and hopefully the President of the European Commission. Because the situation of the industry is really at a terrible state. COVID-19 has had an effect which brought the industry down to levels of 20 years ago. But with all the means of transportation, with all the instruments that we have at the moment. So at UNWTO, from the beginning of this crisis, when we started understanding that Europe was at the heart of it, and therefore, for example, for the impact for the marine and cruise industry, the Mediterranean, we started investigating immediately and digging deep into the numbers to observe, to measure, and to try to draw priorities, guidelines, and instruments that would support the industry as a whole to start the recovery. When there's a crisis, that's the moment when we need to start planning for the recovery, for the restart. That's why we're here together to restart tourism. Understanding the numbers, understanding the situation is obviously very, very important because it's those numbers, it's those elements that would allow all of us to seriously think. And obviously with COVID-19, a pandemic that nobody was expecting, impacting our daily life and impacting our economies with a lot of potential risks, we all need to be ready that when we restart, we cannot restart as it used to be. We need to implement changes. But what changes? Now, allow me to quickly guide you through numbers that sharing my screen. I really do not guarantee that they're the best numbers possible, but we need to know the truth to be able to confront reality. Now, we are at a situation that you can see here where basically the international tourist arrivals declined globally compared to the previous year with an estimate of 65%. Europe itself was 66%. Asia and the Pacific 72%, because of course it was the origin of COVID. But now, as we all know, they have managed to recover. How did they recover? They recovered because of the travel restrictions, because of the fact that everything was actually blocked. And they are talking about numbers that are definitely higher than ours, for example, in Europe. But if we look at the overall situation, because of this incredible block in the mobility and the interconnectivity, obviously we recorded a downfall of almost 100% of the international arrivals. What's at risk? We said before, up to 120 million direct tourism jobs, almost up to 1.2 trillion US dollars in exports from tourism, which means a loss of 1.5 to 2.8 of global GDP. And therefore, all our societies or our efforts for climate change, for conservation, for biodiversity protection at stake. Why? Because when we estimate the impact, we're looking at a scenario which is not necessarily the nicest one, because in the beginning, we all thought that in the beginning of July, maybe even Schengen was going to reopen. So we've done our forecast. We say, okay, if everything reopens properly, and we've actually undertaken a trip to Italy precisely on the 1st of July, symbolically reopening tourism, everything was going to be a little bit, definitely a big loss, but up to 58% in international arrivals. What we've witnessed, honestly, lots of hiccup, lots of opening and closing, lots of last minute warnings. Otherwise, there's quarantine. Again, quarantine used as an instrument to basically halt travel for any destination. Obviously, with no international mobility, doesn't really matter which means of transport, the situation is a crisis. People are staying home. We all spoke about domestic and nearby territory tourism, obviously, because with borders not opened in all destinations homogeneously with protocols that were in dialogue with each other, people just did not travel. So if we look at our estimated scenario, the worst of which was forecasting a complete reopening of borders by the end of December, with an almost 80% decrease compared to the previous year, we can see that we are lying between the first and second scenario. So at the moment, observing the data of summer, we are forecasting a decrease of 65, 66%, confirming what is now actually being a trend. The problem is that now is wintertime. And in wintertime, obviously, with a second wave, especially in Europe, the situation doesn't look incredibly nice. Visually, this is basically what happened this year. We spoke of growth, and this is the normal curve of the tourism sector with a big peak in the summer season. This is what we have seen. Some European destinations have reopened, so they've done better than others. But honestly, the situation doesn't look nice at all. To go a little bit into the topic of today, which is of course, the cruise industry. There is an impact that COVID-19 created in the cruise industry, which is absolutely important, if you allow me, in terms of numbers, but also brings attention to the fact that this is a very delicate time, because already the cruise industry was under scrutiny for their carbon footprint and the damage they could bring to the environment. So the fundamental tool, according to us, is that we have to restart, including the cruise tourism, but with innovative and sustainable solution, because now we're talking about an industry that has to obviously reinvent itself. The cruise tourism industry has a very large value chain. And this value chain obviously has a huge economic impact, which is on the industry itself, on the the providers of the cruises itself, and in general the boats, so that means of transportation via sea, but also a destination, because as we very well know, some destinations have grown because of cruise tourism. So what are we doing at UNWTO? Number one, we want you to know that we're standing by you on a daily basis with instruments that are policy instruments, marketing intelligence instruments, and physical investment and innovation tools. Obviously, the cruise and marine industry require a definite attention, and we are initiating, actually in Europe, in region Europe, research which will involve a lot of stakeholders and member states, specifically on sustainable coastal and maritime tourism. So we will let you know a little bit more, and definitely we want ICOMIA on board and all of you on board for this. This is what we've done throughout these months. We created the Global Tourism Crisis Committee, which is actually going to reconvene in a week's time to speak about what we need to do next. As I said, today we're going to Brussels. We're speaking to politicians. We're all into acting. There's no more time for letters, which we've already written to every prime minister of the world more than once. There's no more time for plans. Now is the time for the actions, for the implementation. So we've had all this kind of instruments which are available, of course, on our website, and our Secretary General, sitting in New York, has released for the first time a policy brief on tourism, where he has identified 5 priority areas to reimagine and rebuild a resilient tourism industry for our communities and for the planet. As we like to say in the United Nations, for people, for the planet, for prosperity. Because the tourism industry is an industry that I and we at UNWTO consider the positive engine of the world. We are the ones that put people together, and we also generate business. So tourism industry is fundamental for each and every one of us. We've also lately convened physically because we want to highlight the importance of convening also physically and resuming and restarting. We are all making big efforts on this. The Executive Council, which is our board of directors, we convened physically in Georgia, Tbilisi. This was happening a month ago. And a month ago, we released our Tbilisi Declaration, which we shared with the whole world. And we actually underlined the 3 pillars of actions, which we're now going around the world to try and implement. I now want to share with you something which is at the moment our pearl in the market intelligence instruments that we're giving. Of course, fully available for free at unwto.org. In this case, you have to look for the Tourism Recovery Tracker. The Tourism Recovery Tracker is an interactive tool which allows us to go deep into, per destination, the global situation, looking at international tourist arrivals, hotel bookings, occupancy rate, air reservation, seat capacity. We're missing data from the cruise industry, from the maritime industry. We need you. We need you on board with us, because this recovery tracker is very, very important, because it allows us on a daily basis, on weekly basis, on monthly basis, to have an overview of what's going on, especially for the maritime tourism industry. Forecast, planning, programming is vital, is crucial. And this is the time when we need to program all together, public, private sector, destination, and transportation, all having in mind that it needs to be done in safety, respecting the safety rules, protecting our lives most of all. Thank you very much. And I really hope that I've given you interesting food for thought for the following conversation. Once again, all my best from Brussels, and have a great one.
Sorry, Stavros, you're on mute.
Thank you. We had Alessandra's recorded speech, and we had some realistic Facts, tourism figures tourism returned to about 20 years ago, unfortunately, and we have this winter coming and uncertainty. But we also, Alessandra said that she needs our feedback from the maritime sector so we can all assist with our proposals and data given to the World Tourism Organization. Now we continue with Mr. Philippe Steele. Philip is the Secretary General of European Boating Industry, representing the European recreational boating industry at European Union level. Philip has a strong personal connection to boating, seagoing experience, and he's an active sailing instructor and skipper. Philip, the panel is yours.
Thank you very much, Stavros, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. This is a global conference, so I don't want to miss anyone out. It is really a pleasure to be speaking today, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you to Stani and the entire ICOMIA team for organizing it. What I want to talk about a bit today is the impact of COVID-19 on the recreational boating industry in Europe, the good, the bad, the opportunities, and what we can learn. I mean, also a bit, and Alessandro just now introduced this a bit, what the EU is doing and what we as EBI are calling for. So next slide, please. So a few words about EBI. EBI, as Stavros has said, represents the European recreational boating industry at EU level. We've been doing that since 2009, and we are based in Brussels. Our aim is to represent and promote the recreational boating industry through advocacy, through meeting with politicians, and with cooperation with EU institutions and stakeholders. We also do this in very close cooperation with our colleagues and friends and partners at ICOMIA. The sort of topics that we are working on are environmental sustainability, climate change mitigation, adaptation, technical issues, international trade, nautical tourism, the blue economy, VAT, and in the last months, very much COVID-19, which has really dominated the work in the past couple of months. I do not want to read out all the numbers on the screen, but just to say that the boating industry in Europe is really quite important and very specialized. It is a very important industry for a number of countries in terms of nautical tourism in the Mediterranean, but also in other parts of Europe. In terms of boat building, it's a very important factor for many countries and for many regions. And it is an industry which has a very high international pedigree. So trade is really important for us. And it is very much SME heavy. You see here on the screen, over 95% of companies are SMEs. So that's really something quite unique, I think, also within the European economy. Tourism itself, which our industry is very much part of, is a very important sector for the European Union. It's around about 22 million jobs and 10% of the EU's GDP. So as an ecosystem, it's the #1 ecosystem for the European Union. So it is no surprise that the impact on tourism from COVID-19 has rightly taken center stage at EU level, which I will touch on later in my presentation. Next slide, please. So in any conversation, it's a time-honored tradition. It's always good to start with the bad news before moving to the good news. So I would say on the bad side, the lockdown in the first couple of months in March and April has really had a major impact on production of boats for the boat yards themselves. In a number of countries, for example, in Italy, boat yards had to close for a couple of weeks. In France, they had to also close or very, very much reduce their activities. So that has really had an impact on boat production, which took a lot of time to catch up on. Then the borders being closed in Europe, which is a really incredible thing to have happened, has really brought a lot of issues for supply chains, boats not being able to be delivered in the first weeks of lockdown. So again, that hasn't had an issue for the boat yards and for the suppliers. And again, it took a lot of time to catch up and make sure those supply chains are re-established. Then the ban on water sports and marina closures, because of the aim of governments to reduce the transmission of COVID-19, has had an impact on the early season and very much also now for boat charter and boat rental and water sports rental in Europe. I would say all in all, those regions and those countries which are very much reliant on inbound tourism and air travel were much more impacted. So in Ireland, in the Mediterranean, of course, very much relies on air travel to get there. So those companies there are much more impacted. And also those companies in Europe which have non-European operations, for example, charter in the Caribbean area or other parts of the world, are also very much impacted. As you've all seen, for those of you who are more accustomed to our industry, the boat shows are very important for our industry. They make up a lot of the sales for our industry, and a lot of those have been cancelled. Thankfully, not all of them, but for example, all the major shows in France have been cancelled. So that is a major issue for our industry, because it does mean there's a lack of options for boat sales and to get customers and new consumers interested in boating. It is possible to catch up on that, and I'm sure we will be able to do that as an industry. So to provide a few numbers, in France, the French industry anticipates that 2020 will see a revenue drop of somewhere between 15 and 30%. And that, of course, very much depends a bit on which subsector and which region in France. In Spain, I understand the reduction is around 15% expected for the year. I was reading just this morning that the Croatian government has said that nautical tourism in Croatia is operating at around about 49% of last year's results. And in Italy, the Confindustria Nautica, the Italian Marine Industry Association, estimated that around a 13% reduction is possible. That was an estimate they made in the middle of lockdown. The forecast is a bit more positive now, and I will come to that a bit later. I would say there were three waves for our industry. First wave was really March, May towards June. And then that's where we had the immediate and strongest negative impact. In the summer, we saw a lot of very positive trends, and I will come to that on the next slide. But since, I would say, the end of August, the late summer period and autumn, the impact of new travel restrictions, new quarantines, and the cancellation of boat shows, of course, has had a negative impact. But, and we saw the numbers from the UNWTO earlier, when Alessandra presented them, the impact on other tourism sectors has been higher. I think that's quite clear. So the situation is not as bad as we may have considered possible in early March when all of this started. But we're still very much at an early stage in this pandemic, and we don't know how it develops. But certainly there have been some positive aspects as well, and some opportunities for our industry that I want to move on. So we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the opportunities and the impact of Corona for our industry. I would say those countries in our industry which have a very strong domestic market have experienced a positive increase in new and second-hand boat sales and charter bookings. So, for example, in Sweden, Germany, and Finland, to name just a few countries, that has been the case. Domestic and more regional tourism has been on the rise, and we have seen a lot of new and younger consumers come into boating, which is something very positive. There's also been an increase in new boat registrations and also boating licenses in a few countries, and I have a few numbers on that in just a second. In general, what I think we are seeing is that non-mass tourism is gaining traction in a lot of parts of Europe and even across other industries. So to mention, for example, caravanning or camping, that has been really very positive development this year. And I think that our industry has definitely benefited from this trend towards non-mass tourism, outdoor tourism, domestic tourism, where it's very easy to socially distance. So here again, to provide a few numbers, in Germany, there's been a very good development this year, and some companies are even experiencing that this year will be better than last year in terms of revenue. That's the case, for example, for a lot of boat dealers, boat manufacturers, but also for a lot of domestic charter companies. And for example, in Germany as well, there's been a 30% increase in new boating licenses, which is again something very positive for this year and also for next year, if these people then go on to stay in boating and buy boats in a few years' time. In Spain, an online booking platform for boat rental said that its reservations increased by 55% in relation to the 2019 season in terms of Spanish tourists. So again, they're good to see that the domestic market is picking up as well. In Italy, and this is the latest numbers from Confindustria Nautica, 8 out of 10 companies view 2021 as a year of revenue stability or growth. So again, something positive here as well. There's of course been an impact of COVID-19 on our work as EBI, and the focus has very much been on keeping EBI members and the industry informed and connected, working with our national member associations and at international level with organizations like the UNWTO and also ICOMIA. We've had dozens of meetings with members of the European Parliament, the Council of the EU Council presidencies, individual member states represented here in Brussels, and commissioners as well. We're also working quite closely with other tourism and travel sectors through the so-called European Tourism Manifesto Coalition where all of these associations are also represented. So if I could move to the next slide, please. What I want to talk about a bit is now recovery. And first of all, sort of highlight a bit what the European Union is doing. The first and foremost, what I want to mention is the EU Recovery Fund. It's called Next Generation EU. And that has a value of over 560 billion euros, which was agreed just before the summer, as you may have seen in the media as well. That recovery fund has a very strong focus on using this opportunity as an environmental and digital transformation of the entire society and all industries. The recovery fund will be based on grants and loans given to individual member states of the European Union, but they can then use to finance their recovery. Joe Biden in the United States is using the term for his campaign, Build Back Better. And that is really what the European Union is trying to do here as well. Our opinion as EBI is that nautical tourism and recreational boating can have a strong role in this recovery fund and all the money that is provided at national level. And I will come to that a bit later as well. The money that has been set out for individual member states is already set out. There's the information available online. And for example, Italy will receive over 60 billion euros in grants. Greece will receive over 15 billion euros in grants for their national recovery plan. In the discussions we've had with the European Commission, they see us falling under two, what we call ecosystems, so bigger than industries, but ecosystems. One being tourism, where there's an investment need of 161 billion euros identified by the European Commission, and mobility and transport, where there's investment need of 64 billion euros identified. That's a recovery fund. I will come to that in a few minutes again about what our demands are as EBI. The second point is what I touched on earlier, is the travel restrictions and all of the mess and the chaos we've seen in Europe and all the air travel issues that I'm sure Marios will also touch on in just a few minutes. Here, the EU and the European Commission is very much hoping to harmonize travel rules and restrictions, all these issues such as color coding. Is a region a red zone, an orange zone, a green zone, whatever color they have chosen? What are the quarantine rules? What are the different forms you have to fill out? All of this is what the European Union is trying to harmonize. This is not an easy task, but in just the last few days, they managed to reach an agreement on common color coding, which is already a good start, and we hope that will progress so that by next year there will be a common understanding of all of these issues. The European Union is also developing a new tourism strategy, the Agenda 2050, which kicked off yesterday at a virtual conference here in Brussels. And there also we hope that nautical tourism will be very much included. Then there's a lot of other reports and initiatives by other EU institutions going on. For example, by the European Economic and Social Committee, which is an official EU institution. And they recently released an opinion on tourism that specifically identified nautical tourism as a potential growth area that requires specific support measures. And we were very happy to see that included after a lot of discussions we've had with them as well. So if we could move to the next slide, please. And here I would like to highlight a bit what we are calling for in reaction to what the EU is proposing. So in general, we are asking the European Union to do more on tourism policy, which traditionally hasn't been very strong at the EU level, and help with competitiveness of the nautical tourism industry. So that also includes, for example, issues such as VAT, qualifications, and a lot of other issues. On the recovery fund, we want promotion of our industry, we want help with marketing, but also with research and innovation on the new clean technologies, on new materials, but also very much infrastructure. And here, we're here at the World Marinas Conference. I think marinas really have a central place here, and they are the central infrastructure for our industry. So we hope that the recovery fund and all the EU funds that will come over the next years will help with the digital and sustainable transformation of marinas as well. And that's what we are working on. And these are the messages that we are delivering. And for example, tomorrow I will be speaking in the European Parliament at an event with MEPs and the European Commission on recovery and renewal of maritime industries. So we really hope that these messages are being heard clearly here in Brussels, and I think they are. So if we could move to the next slide, and this is everyone's favorite slide because it's my last slide. I wanted to highlight a bit the learnings that I think have come out of this year 2020 and COVID-19 impact. the new normal that we have seen, and I hope I've been able to highlight that, may lead to a boating and water sports renaissance. And we see a lot of new consumers come into the market. We see a lot of interest in boating, and that's a very positive development. And I think that's something that our industry can really build on in the next months and years. And that's something very important for us. There will be a negative impact, of course, from this year. And I've mentioned a few of the examples earlier. And we should not leave out of sight the looming economic downturn that will come out of the impact on other industries. And that will impact our industry as well, of course, eventually. The third point is really about resilience and preparedness. I think this year has shown quite clearly that this is something that all industries, and not just our industry, has to be prepared for. So that for the second wave, which is happening in many countries already, but also the third wave, the fourth wave, we don't know how long this pandemic will carry on. We need to make sure that our companies are able to continue working, and also that we can welcome boaters across Europe and they are able to travel despite the pandemic going on. I think that's very important. And of course, it's about being prepared for new crises, of course, as well. The last point is about boat shows. I mentioned that already earlier. It's important that they get back on track. It was very good to see that the Genoa Boat Show, which happened 2 weeks ago and finished very successfully with over 70,000 visitors, that took place. That was already a very positive development, and we saw a lot of other smaller boat shows already take place in Poland, Finland, and elsewhere. And we look forward to Port Düsseldorf in January, which is really the center point for our industry as well. Other issues, I think, longer term issues that are still on our agenda, and I think they are important to keep in mind, are environmental sustainability. The European Green Deal is very much at the heart of what the European Union is doing. And that's something that we need to take into account for our industry as well, and how we can react to that. And of course, digitalization is very much still important for us. So if we move to the next slide, and really the last slide, I just wanted to thank everyone for their attention. It's good to have 136 participants in this virtual room, and I look forward to discussing all of this with you. And with that, thank you very much, and back to Stavros.
Thank you very much, Philip, for your very interesting introduction and speech. We heard very, very interesting things. I will keep the statement that regions and countries reliant on inbound tourism and air travel were more impacted, because this will give me the assist to go to Dr. Marios Menexiadis, our next speaker from the aviation industry. Dr. Marios Menexiadis is the Group Internal Audit Auditor and Data Protection Officer of Aegean Airlines. Aegean is the biggest airlines in Greece and one of the biggest in the Med. Dr. Marios has great professional experience from international accounting firms and various industries such as chemicals and F&B. He's also an affiliate professor on a series of postgraduate programs. Dr. Marios, the panel is yours.
Thank you very much, Stavros. Thank you very much, ICOMIA, for inviting me. So since, Stavros, you have made the introduction for me, I don't need to introduce myself. So I will just move on quickly to the small amount of slides that I can introduce you with. Unfortunately, the news were not optimistic for over the last months, and it seems that they're not going to be optimistic over the next few months as well. So let me just tell you how the airline industry operates, and this will make it easier for all of us to understand what actually we have faced, and actually we faced violently, it's the right word. So Q1, as we call it, which is the first 3 months of the year, normally, due to seasonality, in terms of profits, there are no profits for the airlines, and it is a loss. The second quarter, the second 3 months period, is actually the point that we balance our losses, and we start, due to seasonality for Greece actually, we start increasing our flights. So it means that we are moving to our summer schedule. Q3, which is the 3 months within the summer period, is it is the period that we actually record the profits of the year, since everything moves smoothly without any negative surprises. And actually it makes the 50% of the total sales throughout the year. And Q4 is the last quarter that we retain our profitability. So actually, what happened in March 2020, given the following events? The European Union decided on EU countries to close the national borders, which means that there were almost 0 flights per day. Normally, the airlines have the winter schedule, which is approximately for our size of the airline, 200 flights per day. And as we progress to the summer period, this moves on to almost 700 flights per day. So automatically, we ceased operations on every international flight except the one that goes to Brussels due to the European Parliament. Within the Greek area, let's call it like this, we didn't have more than 5 flights to operate, which means that you are not in a position even to plan which type of aircraft would you operate in order to reduce your expenses and costs as well. So permission for flights were only within the national territories. We were allowed to have flights regarding repatriation, but do not count that this amount of flights were enough to cover all these expenses and losses. We performed approximately 30 to 40 repatriation flights, which means these figures are nothing compared to what we are used to operate on a daily basis. Airlines were allowed to operate cargo flights, and specifically only for health and safety equipment as well as health consumables. Moreover, cargo regarding food, etc., equipment, yes, this is one of the flights that airlines could perform. Imagine that an airline of our size can transfer more or less 60,000 passengers per day. So given these figures, and if you multiply it with the number of the airlines and given the much larger fleets than Aegean has, imagine you can calculate and you can figure out the millions of passengers that were not traveling, not only in the winter time, but also in the summer period as well, given all the restrictions. What are the consequences? The consequences from these decisions are obvious. You still have grounded fleets and you are struggling between the standard costs and the expensive maintenance costs. So if you have a look at, for example, the Athens International Airport, you will find even now more than just 100 aircrafts being in a parking position, which is, with one word, this is really sad. It's really sad. Next slide, please. The costs for the airlines can be split into important categories. The first one is the standard costs, and the second one is the variable cost. So with regards to the first one, the standard costs, we can include the monthly leases, the monthly reserves, and the payroll. So assuming that for an aircraft, you can have a monthly lease up to $400,000 just, let's say, for taking photos of the aircraft, including the maintenance reserves, based on which these amounts can have to be added for a period of the 12 years that more or less you use as a normal leasing period, plus the payroll that you cannot avoid. If you decide to start a flight, if you start to operate, the variable costs can be added on this, which is about fueling, landing, parking, the crew benefits, traffic controls, the Eurocontrol, and many others. So if you decide to ground your fleet, you have still to suffer the standard costs. So what's the consequence for the airline here? It is a huge amount of cash burning on a monthly basis. And believe me, it's simple as that. It is cash burning on a monthly basis. Given the figures that we have published already, it was approximately 45 million cash burn on a monthly basis. Let aside the increased maintenance costs. You may not operate, meaning that you don't have to smooth your costs, your expenses regarding maintenance. But if you have grounded fleets, in order to prepare your fleet and be ready to operate again, you cannot imagine how many millions of euros do you have spent in order to have this fleet ready again for operations. If we think a little bit further apart from the airline and look at a view at the consequences for the airports also suffer less revenue due to less or zero flights because the passengers traffic is almost zero. Moreover, since the rental agreements with the shops and within the airport is based on a percentage on revenues, automatically this figure is also close to zero, which means also the airports suffer severe losses from space rentals within the airport and the trade that does not actually exist. If we also calculate that most of the airlines renew their fleet from time to time, and this time to time is something flexible, but actually not more than 10 years, and you can imagine based on this that the billions that have to be invested and actually without having any cash flow right now to support such kind of investments. So there are a lot of persons that in our industry that make a joke actually, and they say that it is much easier to negotiate with the IMF rather than negotiating, for example, with the Airbus or Boeing in terms of the production of your fleet. Really, we are laughing with this, but really it is the case. So imagine that the Airbus also decided to slow down its production and approximately to take back time for an average of 3 years per airline, which means that the production has severely slowed down. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. In terms of figures, the consequences given the figures from the Athens International Airport and on the period of from January to August, which is 8 months period. Before I started describing the figures, imagine that if we had to discuss only from March to August, these figures would have been even worse. So the 2020 versus 2019, the 8-month period, we had a 47% reduction on domestic passengers, which is quite enough since our heavy industry is tourism. We had 66.2% reduction on international passengers, which means disaster effect. We had 65.3% less passengers as a total, not as Aegean and Olympic, but as a traffic, passengers traffic from the Athens International Airport, which is supposed to be the hub within Greece. 44.2 less flights, domestic ones. 53.8 less international flights, and as a total, within the same 8-month period of 2020 and 2019, 76,458 less flights as a total. Given the investment that Fraport has done and has took over 14 airports within Greece for the same period, given these 14 airports always, they faced a 51.1% reduction on domestic passengers, 78.9% reduction on international passengers. There are more charter flights traveling directly to Fraport airports. That is why the figures here are even higher than the Athens International Airport. 74.5% less passengers as a total, 46% less domestic flights, 71.2 less international flights, given the criterion above, as I described, and as a total, 93,425 less flights as a total. So imagine that if at these less flights, we carry a lot of tourists that will spend their money later on at your industry, imagine the effect that we both have faced, and this effect was once again violent. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please. The airline industry we will face a lot of difficulties in the next years. IATA has predicted that we will face the gray, let's say, area, not the white area, the gray area between 2023 and 2024, as given the fact that we do not have international halls, we do not operate, let's say, in Canada or in Australia or in the US, we have placed this gray area between 2022 and 2023. Hundreds of used aircrafts are already available in the market or have already returned to lessors, given the penalty that the airlines have to pay in order to, let's say, stop these contract agreements. It is estimated that more than 1,000 aircrafts are already available only within Europe. 1,000 aircrafts is calculated of hundreds and hundreds of millions of available seats already available within Europe. No new jobs are going to be produced given this decline. Approximately one aircraft generates 80 direct or indirect job positions. So given this decline, unfortunately, we will not face any new job position. Cash injections are needed from hundreds of millions. For example, 600 millions was the last one from AirAsia, for example, AirAsiana, up, given the last example of Lufthansa, for $10 billion. These are supposed to be simply cash injections without the loans or without the working capital that is needed in order to continue smoothly your operations. Going concern is going to be addressed for the next year as well. We will also face summer schedules with less flights versus the winter schedule. As I told you before, given our size, we operate more or less 700 flights daily compared to 200 flights daily in the winter schedule. So this will be a dramatic drop. And even worse, the winter schedule will have less flights versus the winter schedule of last year. Continue now with whatever Philip mentioned before about resilience and digital transformation. Thankfully for us, business continuity and resilience is a fact that we already have worked on it, because the most basic characteristic of the airline industry is automation as well. The legislation obliges us to work further and further with a view to business continuity and resilience. Unfortunately,
1 minute, Mr. Marius.
Yes, I'm done already. Unfortunately, if we do not manage to recover from the COVID consequences, we will not be able to even continue discussing on further areas that we could exploit. So it is a matter of whether we manage to recover from COVID or not. It's simply a matter of survival within the airline industry. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm mute. Thank you very much, Dr. Marios. Things look a little bit difficult for aviation, and not only for the season past, but also for the season coming. We hope the best. We have some questions prepared for you. So I will pass to our last but not least speaker, who is Mrs. Rosemary Pavlatou. Rosemary is the director and shareholder of both A1 and BWA Yachting. She has been involved in the super yacht industry for over 40 years, and she is mainly known for her work and experience in yacht chartering and brokerage. Rosemary is an active member of many international organizations working hard and encouraging yachts to cruise at Greek waters. Rosemary, the floor is yours.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much to ICOMIA for inviting me. What I'm going to talk about now is about the super yacht industry, which is a little bit different, I think, to the more general boating industry that Philip was talking about. The super yacht and mega yacht industry are the larger yachts. The yachts we deal with are more than 35 meters, going up to several hundred meters. And both our companies, A1 and BWA, we do a lot of different things in A1, but the BWA are agents for yachts, so visiting yachts. So we have an on-the-ground relationship with the yachts, and we see yachts coming and going, and that's our daily bread and butter. Could I have the next slide? Do I have my first slide? Right. Well, the early challenges that we found, I mean, like everybody, in common with everybody, were really the prohibitions on travelling. We were hard pressed at the beginning to try and help yachts. Our business is to try and help yachts plan what they want to do. If you don't know from one moment to the other what they are going to be allowed to do, where they're going to be allowed to go, what the regulations are going to be, it becomes really very difficult. Every country changes their regulations on a regular basis, usually 15 days. So our biggest challenge was helping people to make a coherent plan, because they had all these other things to contend with too, which were whether or not they were allowed to enter the country that they wanted to cruise from, whether the yacht was allowed to go in. Croatia started much earlier than most of the other Mediterranean countries, allowing yachts in. There were prohibitions into Europe for most of the summer for US citizens, for Russians, and for Middle Eastern citizens, who are the backbone of the super yacht industry. I mean, this was alike for owners and for charter clients. So when you've got problems of the yacht itself being allowed or being restricted, there are different places they couldn't continue from. For Greece, we couldn't allow anybody in from Albania or from Turkey. So our two neighbouring countries, basically. So it made just positioning the yachts where they wanted to be a problem. And then we had the problem of getting the guests or the owners to their yachts. There were, and with these changing on a frequent basis and keeping everybody informed was that was one of our biggest challenges. Of course, everybody wanted to be comfortable on board the yachts, so we did thousands of COVID tests. The clients coming, the crew, we were conducting COVID, and we still are conducting COVID tests, or arranging COVID tests, we don't conduct them, on a daily basis. So everybody wants to, so this was an additional issue that the yachts had to face, because they're in close proximity with the clients. So therefore everybody wants to be comfortable on a yacht. That said, a yacht is one of the safest places. That's why we had quite a lot of interest. People perceived, and I know absolutely right, a yacht is a place where people can be very away from everybody else. They can be as isolated as they wish. They don't need to interact with other people. So the risk of getting COVID later is much reduced. And most of our clients, I mean, there was a huge increase this year, which Mario will not like the sound of. We had a huge increase in people wanting to fly on private jets rather than commercial. So they were flying on private jet, they were going to the yacht, everybody was having a test, so they felt very secure. And it does make a very secure environment for the people who can afford it, of course. Now, yacht charter is an indicator. Most of our yachts are private yachts, but the charter industry is a huge indicator of people's intent. And of course, in March, April, when COVID first arrived on the scene, there was an enormous move to cancel every charter. Everybody just wanted to cancel. They wanted the money back, and there was a huge struggle over contracts. I won't bore you with all this. It got very intense. It got very complicated. People misunderstood the terms of contracts. So there were lots of wrangling and problems there. And but in the end, everything got settled. It was very stressful. Several brokers have told me that it was the worst season of their entire career. But interestingly, having got through all this and having gone through all these charters being cancelled, there was a huge interest in booking charters very soon after we'd finished cancelling. So in fact, we could see that even though people were concerned about being able to get to the yacht or whatever they had booked previously, there was still huge interest in yachts and yacht charter, which gave us some cause for feeling that the season wasn't completely lost, and it wasn't. And of course, in the same way as charter clients, the owners had the same barriers to getting to their yachts. I would go to the next slide, please. No. You have some numbers on the next slide. So these are the reductions in the yachts moving around. This is from Marine Traffic, which is a site that follows the yachts. You can see all the yachts on that, and you can see the reduction. I mean, in Albania, 75.88% of yachts from previous years. There are huge declines in. These are the yachts just moving around in the Mediterranean. But as you can see, interestingly, Croatia was only minus 27%. And that, I believe, is because they opened early and they allowed more yachts in, so they had a longer season. So they've done fairly well. But overall, it's a kind of blanket sort of 50% reduction in the yachts that are arriving. Now, what do those yachts do? And that's where we get some winners in the yachting industry, because the yachts stayed where they were largely. Sometimes that meant staying in America and not coming across to the Mediterranean, but generally they stayed in marinas or in shipyards. Also in the Mediterranean, they just didn't move anywhere because of the uncertainty, because the owner couldn't get to their yacht, because whatever. So a lot of places, a lot of marinas were really very full, and shipyards, typically in a time of distress such as this, yachts will go to a shipyard and do maintenance, spend the time. It's a safe place for the yacht. The yacht's got to be somewhere. It can't just wander about. So it's got to be somewhere. It's either got to be in a marina or it's got to be in a shipyard. Some people choose a shipyard and do the maintenance work that they would normally have done and just stay there. And of course, if things look really bad, if they've done some maintenance recently, they get a higher sale price if they're going to sell the boat, which of course some do. Of course, that also allows a reduction in some costs. Some of the crew were let go, and people just hunkered down and tried to get through the season. Well, as to next season, I mean, of course, everything's, as we've said, is uncertain. It all depends on COVID. It all depends on how things go this winter. It all depends on whether we can find some inoculation or some treatment for COVID, and what travel restrictions will be in place. So again, planning is exceptionally difficult, but I feel that we've already got some experience. So we're not starting from ground zero as we did this year. So even in the worst event, we understand better already how to handle things. There is an interest in charter. We've seen charter for next year being booked, though there's now, for the charter agreements, there are different terms being put in so that people can cancel if they need to. We have a growing fleet, as if you could put us the next slide. So there's a growing potential fleet of these are the boats that are being built at the moment, and you can see the rise in the number of potential yachts that we have available. So I'm quite optimistic, even through COVID. There are new launches going to happen, so there are going to be more clients. And we know how to, we're much more able to start off much more organised than we were last year. And so we see that there's the demand. The result will be restricted just by people's ability to travel, which of course is an unknown. But we succeeded quite well this year in allowing people to get to their yachts, and of course everybody still sees yachting as they should do, as one of the most one of the safest ways to holiday. So we hope that we'll be seeing as many, if not more, people next year in the Mediterranean. That's me.
Okay, Rosemary, thank you very much for your presentation. It is very interesting to see that although the COVID and the problems, still the super yacht industry is doing well. There is a demand and there is revenue from the shipyards, and the big shipyards are still getting orders. And so it is a good optimistic message for our market. We are now passing to our Q&A session, and I would like to start with some questions from our attendees, from our audience. We have a very good question from Mr. Giorgos Kiannis, which is to all panelists. I will prefer to start with Philip for this question, which is, what's your opinion about virtual boat shows? What do you think, Philip? Do you believe that COVID-19 is give us the chance to start thinking of the future about the virtual boat shows?
It's a good question. I think there's a lot of different facets to it, and clearly online will be part of the solution, and this is why we're here today and we can talk today. But coming to virtual boat shows, I think they have a role to play. My personal opinion is they supplement the activities of manufacturers, of boat yards, of charter companies, and those of existing boat shows. My opinion is though that they are not a replacement for boat shows. They are an add-on, and they can be a very useful add-on, and that's, I think, quite important. They can be part of a hybrid solution. But personally, at the end of the day, my opinion is that you don't buy a boat just by looking at it online. You need to touch it, you need to feel it, you want to take it out beforehand. So I think that's something important to say. So it can be part of the solution, but it's definitely not the only solution.
Right, thank you, Philip, for your answer. I would like also to hear Rosemary's answer for this. Is this the virtual boat shows the future, Rosemary?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. I'd like to think so, because it would be much less expensive. It would mean much less travel. But I think, for me, certainly, as dealing with charter, you have to meet the crew, you have to see the boat, you have to meet people. As you say, for brokerage, you want to see the boat. You can't buy a boat from a photograph. And all the connections you make on a personal basis. I can't see for the super yacht industry what you can achieve actually online. That you really do need to be there, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. I would like also to address a question to Dr. Marios. We are operating marinas and represent marinas all over the world. ICOMIA Marinas Group is an important group of ICOMIA. So there are many questions. What about the private jet flights? How is that sector? Can this sector assist or being developed in a way that will assist marinas in the next season? Because uncertainty is also for us. We don't know if our customers, our clients will be able to fly to the airport. So is the jet flights, the private sector, the private jet flights, could this be a solution for the marinas?
The cost of a private jet compared to an Airbus, for example, 320, it's completely different. As also Rosemary said, it is much more safe to do it privately, but on the other hand, you simply are asking this thing just for a completely specific audience. Mm. So if the question is, could you have passengers that would be interested in renting a private jet instead of an Airbus, for example, buying a ticket from an Airbus to travel and then go to the marina? The answer is no.
No, if you allow me, the question is that, let's say that we do have these passengers for the super yachts and the owners who are able to pay for that. But okay. is it possible to isolate this part in the airports and the procedures and the constraints to get advantage of it?
The answer is yes in this case. And a fantastic example is, for example, the island of Mykonos. If you have at the airport of Mykonos 3 parking positions for bigger aircrafts, you will also see at the parking positions at least 12 private jets at the same time. If this is a useful comparison for this example. The answer is yes, but you simply refer to a different kind of audience.
Thank you. This is also what we believe in the marinas. We have another question to Rosemary from Mr. Christoforos Charisis. Rosemary, what policy would you suggest regarding cancellations? A strict policy to what is mentioned in the contract, or to make a refund of the initial deposit of the total contract value, because we have many cases now pending in our industry. What do you suggest for these regarding these cancellations?
Well, it depends when the charter contract was signed, and new charter contracts now have new clauses in that make it much clearer, and it's a case for negotiation between the owner and the client, what they both would like to do. The existing agreement wasn't clear, that we discovered this winter. But there is the European law that says that the client should be offered a change of dates within the next 18 months. And if they don't take it up within 18 months, they get their whole deposit back. That's the European law that goes with it. But with new contracts, I would suggest that there is a negotiation beforehand about what would happen if the client can't get there, if the charter has to be abandoned for some reason.
Thank you, Rosemary. Another question, and I saw the comment from Oscar Sitches also, is a question coming from Theo Maverick to Philip. Do you think, Philip, that in addition to the virtual boat shows, could the solution be the private boat shows in the marinas or wherever you can have a private boat show? Would this assist and be more interesting in the future of the for the serious buyers?
Absolutely, I think that's a very good point. I didn't mention that earlier in my intervention, but I think private boat shows operated by private yards are very interesting for some boat yards, and maybe also more larger boat yards. For those that are already interested and just want to have a last look or a second to last look at the boat before they buy it. But they're not a replacement for boat shows, because boat shows are also there to sort of bring boating and bring boats to the wider public. And those are maybe interested to buy a boat in 2 or 3 years or even 10 years time. So it's about getting consumers interested in boating, on going on a boating holiday or buying a boat even. And that's where sort of a normal classic boat show has a role to play as well.
Right, okay. We have another question from Mick Bettersworth. And Mick is asking to Rosemary, if you can answer, are you finding that charterers are spending more time aboard the yachts rather than going ashore, leading to a drop in income for the tourist industry in the destination ports and marinas? This also leads to the crews having to work harder. Should the crews also work harder for this?
Paradoxically, no. I mean, we've been promoting yachts being, independent of everybody and being able to, you can go to distant beaches and, be looked after on board, and you don't have to, go and risk getting COVID. But basically, people want to go to Mykonos and party, it seems. No, more people seem to want to do things ashore. I think maybe even more than other years, possibly because they've all got fed up with being restricted at home. But so I don't think there's been a reduction in the income for local destinations. The reductions come through the reduced numbers.
Right. Okay. And a question to Dr. Marios. We heard Philip talking about recovery funds from EU to support boating. We have heard also that big European airlines are in discussion with the governments to agree on financial support packages for aviation, airline companies mainly. Which are, in your opinion, if there are any, terms or constraints to be considered for a financial support by the state that will ensure the sustainability of the airline companies?
So, from the experience that we had also in Greece and within the other with the other European airlines, the financial support is not free. So, a support actually is never free when it comes to finance. It is like giving a bond loan. In case that you are not able to pay it back, it seems that you will lose part of your shareholder percentage. So this financial support always have to do as a guarantee for the state, for the government, let's say, that they need a guarantee in terms of percentage in the shareholder scheme. In other words, the same applied with Lufthansa. The German government, okay, they may have supported financially Lufthansa with approximately 10 billion euros, but in case that they are not able to pay back this financial support, they will lose part of their shareholder percentage, which is approximately 20%. So this financial support never comes for free.
Nothing is free in this life. Huh?
Unfortunately.
Next question to Rosemary. Rosemary, you talked about some winners during the pandemic. And I guess this is the story always. So can you recall a respective case from the past? You have 40 years of experience. When we had some boating sectors winning and others losing market share?
Well, I think, I mean, 2008, we saw a similar situation when we had the recession. And I think certainly then shipyards gained. I think marinas probably gained a little bit. And brokerage gained hugely because there was a huge change of hands of yachts. A lot of yachts went on the market. So brokerage did quite well out of it. So there were some winners.
All right. Another question, and I think this is a question that we all have and has partially been already answered in your presentations, but I would like to hear, and I think our attendees would like to hear your personal estimation for the next year high season, for the next summer, let's say, in terms of economic impact on your industry. And we can make guess, we can make assumptions, but let's hear your personal opinion. I would start with Dr. Marios for aviation.
Stavros, honestly speaking, we are not in a position even to make estimates. We have also to do with the psychological, the fear factor, which means that, for example, if we do not hear about a good news, for example, like the vaccine or something like that, we are not in a position to make estimates. Even our schedules change every week. Unfortunately, even now, our schedules change, believe it, every week. Consequently, we are not in a position to make any plans, any estimates for the next year. Unfortunately.
Okay. So we go to Philip. Philip, what is your personal estimation? Realistic, optimistic, whatever you like. Tell us your personal opinion.
I always remain optimistic, Stavros, but you do ask the $1 million question, I would say. What will next season look like? I think this season has shown that charter tourism, boating, large yachting, as Rosemary has said, does have a role to play, and people are interested in doing this sort of activity, be it at the nearest lake, be it at the nearest coast, or even if they can and if they are not afraid of it, as Marios has said, flying across Europe to do it. So I think if we get a few conditions right, like getting air travel back up and running, not having messages of fear being spread, and having some positive news, like let's say testing some sort of a vaccine, that would very much help. But certainly, in any case, I think that that boating has a positive outlook in the next years as well.
Thank you, Philip. And Rosemary, your personal forecast?
Well, I mean, really, like everybody else, I mean, it all depends on COVID. I think we're in a better position, as I said, anyway, to help people. We've learned quite a lot this summer. I hope we don't need to implement it next summer. I hope it's going to all have gone away. But who knows? I mean, if it hasn't, then we'll deal with it, and we'll deal with it better than we did this year. That's all I can say, because we already have some experience, and we'll have to deal with what comes. I don't have a magic ball either. I don't know.
Well, okay. Nobody knows, of course, and we all are trying to figure out what will happen and how the medical developments will progress. But I see quite a lot of differences between boating sectors. Within boating sectors, you can see other sectors suffering more, other less. But you can see also a big difference when you compare with aviation. I mean, the figures that Dr. Marios presented today show that another industry another from boating, I mean, is suffering a lot, and the prospects go week by week and day by day to figure out how the companies will manage this crisis. I would like to ask also, Philip, do you have any other, or Rosemary better, do you have any charter figures from Baltic area, or it is Mediterranean mainly your figures and the table you show us?
I haven't prepared any. We do have some. We've just, BWA has just opened in the Baltic, so we are beginning to see. But there's not an awful lot of super yacht boating. There's a lot of boating goes on in the Baltic, but super yachts are just beginning to go. There's only a small industry there at the moment, and I don't have figures, I'm afraid. But
okay,
it is beginning, and there is some movement there.
Okay. Also, this reminds me also Alessandra's request to collect data, and perhaps we should do it through ICOMIA and give feedback to other organizations, because this will assist all of us, and especially the World Tourism Organization, to make analysis and prepare the strategy for the next season. Another question, Philip, is can you elaborate or think of digital transformation for marinas or other boating sectors, and give us some good examples, some good news from there?
Thank you. Yes, I saw that question come up on the chat, so thank you for posing that. And I don't just want to leave digital transformation standing there as a buzzword. I think that's often done, so I think it's good to go into it a bit more. I think when it comes to marinas, it can be very simple, and we know that in some marinas we're still missing necessary Wi-Fi infrastructure. In some smaller marinas, it's about rolling out 5G. It's providing that sort of infrastructure as well, which is really interesting for boaters. It's about connecting the boat to the marina so that it's possible to book ahead. It's about making sure that the marina knows sort of what traffic is coming in. It's about improving the sort of land-sea connectivity. It's about sort of connecting all of these different aspects. And I think also what we saw this year is that the sort of aspect of automatizing the customer interaction with any sort of business, but also with marina, that's some sort of technology which I think will be very interesting for consumers and for marinas in the next years as well. So I think those are some of the points to highlight, the more large infrastructure things, but also some specific technology aspects.
Okay, and another question, Philip, which comes for the European market, concerns the European market, is regarding the recreational marine market has seen a boom of new boat owners due to COVID. That is good news. And certainly the US, Mr. Eric Fisher is asking this. Certainly the US, they were waiting lists to purchase vessels. So do you feel like in a couple of years, this will lead to used boats going up for sale as things get back to normal?
I think we've already seen some of that this year. We already saw that simply because manufacturers were not ready. It's time to produce a boat. In some countries, in some dealerships, everything that was in stock was sold. That included also second-hand boats. So I think we're already seeing some of that now, but of course that has an impact, of course, also in 10 years' time about new people wanting to sell their second-hand boats that they bought this year. So I think that's a trend that we can expect as well.
Okay, thank you, Philip. I think we have some 5 minutes more for any questions. I will go to Roberto Perocchio, and who is asking which are the expectations for the Caribbean super yacht charter winter season. Do you have any, Rosemary, any feedback for Caribbean super yacht charter? Do you know?
They seem to be doing very well. The Caribbean has done very well as far as COVID is concerned. And what I hear is that there's quite a good demand there. In fact, to prepare for this, I spoke to a number of yacht brokers, and one large yacht brokering house was not going to go to the Antigua show because they didn't want to expose their crew just before the charter season to the possibility of COVID with a lot of people coming on board. So they've got an important charter season ahead of them. So I'm sure they're indicative of most of the charter companies. So and our offices in the Caribbean have actually done very well this summer too. I mean, I think maybe some boats stayed there when people didn't come across the Mediterranean. So they've had an unusually busy summer as well as their winter season. So I think the Caribbean's doing reasonably well.
That's good also for chartering, and we hope that the market will return to the best figures possible for Mediterranean and Europe also next high season. I would like to close now our session. At this point, we have completed our Q&A session and the second session of the ICOMIA World Marina virtual conference Industry Reconnect. Many thanks to our speakers for your valuable contribution to our conference. Many thanks to ICOMIA Organizing Committee, Udo and Stani, and our ICOMIA Marina Group members. And thank you all for attending the conference today. Don't forget, next Tuesday, same time, we have our third session, Technology. Looking forward with Idan Cohen moderating. See you all then. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.